Myself, Sai Jaisheel Polimera. I'm studying in BTech third year in Bennett University. So the topic here is browser security. Before going into the deep study of browser security, let us know about what is a browser, how a web browser works, and what are the main features and functionalities that a web browser have. So, a web browser, also known as a browser, is a software application that allows you to access information on the World Wide Web, which discloses www. When a user requests a web page from a specific website, the web browser requests the content from a web server and shows it on the user's device. A web browser is not the same as a search engine, despite the fact the two are often confused by many people. A search engine is simply a website that provides links to the other websites to a user for the use. A user must, however, have a web browser installed in the devices in order to connect to a website server and view its web pages. Coming to the content point, here in this presentation or video, we'll learn about what is browser security, introduction, and how the browser and network both contact or communicate so that the user can access the files which he wants in the internet browser network. And third will be the attacks on browser, about how the attacks basically occurs when a browser and when a user is requesting some data from it. And fourth will be the features, about how and what features we should implement so that we'll securely do browsing, and the vulnerabilities which may affect our browsing history and steal our data from our computers. And lastly, we'll learn about how we can do secure browsing so that our data may not get stolen by the hacker who is trying to hack our devices while we are surfing to the internet and searching for things. So coming to the introduction point, browser security is an application of internet security to web browsers in an order to protect network data and computer systems from breaches of privacy or malware. So, a web browser function starts with a user entering the desired URL, which stands for Uniform Resource Locator, in the address bar of the browser. For example, let's take https www.google.com. Depending on the URL prefix, the web browser interprets the URL and displays the content to the user. The URL prefix provides the protocol used to access the location. HTTP and HTTPS are the most commonly used URL prefixes by the users, so that and these are the main prefixes which can be used we can so that we can do secure browsing in our laptops or devices. To know more about the web browser security, it consists of all measures, procedures, and policies necessary to protect users accessing the internet from a web browser application. Browser security is an application of internet security to web browsers in an order to protect network data and computer systems from breaches of privacy or malware. Security experts of browsers often use JavaScript, sometimes with cross-site scripting, also known as XSS, with a secondary payload using Adobe Flash Player. Security exploits can also take advantage of vulnerabilities, which are also known as security holes or loopholes of a system, that are commonly exploited in all browsers including Mozilla Firefox, Google Chrome, Opera, Microsoft Edge, Internet Explorer, and Safari, which are the topmost browsers used by the users from the world. Coming to the part where we'll know about how a browser and network communicate so that the user can get the requested data to his or his computer. So, a basic web browsing session will work like the following. A person specifies a URL in a browser. The browser then initiates a TCP connection to the server or the server pool using port 80, which is a famous and most important one by default. True its IP address. After the server completes the acknowledgement of its site of the TCP connection, the browser sends HTTPS request to the server to retrieve the content. After the server replies with content for the page, the browser retrieves it from the HTTP packets and displays it accordingly for the user. The browser may also save temporary information called cookies about its connection to local files on the client computer. So, when a browser sends requests, it may also reveal a private information of the user. When a browser receives information or code, it may be corrupted by the running unsafe code, which may or may not be implemented by the hacker. And it is also be very dangerous to network attacks because considering this network security, it is very important that we use the right browser and the right way so that our data may not be get stolen by the hacker. Attacks on browser. An attacker exploits the software web server program on the online server to perform directory transversal attacks. Browser attacks are very common and are likely to succeed against systems that have not been hardened against them specifically. Some of the most commonly used browsers, such as Microsoft's Internet Explorer and Mozilla Firefox, now include at least a rudimentary form of protection against such attacks. Browser security plugins such as NoScript for Firefox and Guarded ID for Internet Explorer can also help to foil such attacks. Unfortunately, the most commonly used operating systems have only a very minimal implementation of capability based security, and this does not often extend through the sharing of permission between applications. In most cases, in order to mitigate the attacks that we discuss, additional layers of security in the form of application or plugins are needed. As we are coming to the main part, what which types of attacks are basically implemented by hackers on the user to steal their information. The most used attacks are cross-site scripting, buffer overflow, extreme phishing, and session hijacking. These are the main and most widely used attacks or types of attacks which are used by hackers to steal data. Deeply going into how attacks actually get implemented to steal information from the user while he or she is surfing to the internet from their computer or laptop. So, when we get to know about the types of attacks, which are basically session hijacking and phishing attack, so if we go into the deep knowledge of session hijacking, it starts when a user gains unauthorized access to a user session's ID. Attackers typically gain this access by either stealing a user session cookie, hence, the alternative name of cookie hijacking comes here, or convince the user to click on a malicious link that contains a predictor session ID, which tricks the service into thinking that the attacker is the legitimate user engaging in the same session. So, secondly, it is a phishing attack. Phishing is a type of social engineering attack often used to steal user data, including login credentials and credit card numbers. It occurs when an attacker masquerading as a trusted entity dupes a victim into opening an email, instant message, or a text message. The recipient is then tricked into clicking a malicious link, which can lead to the installation of many malware or many infected malware, the freezing of the system as a part of ransomware attack, or the revealing of sensitive information is done in a phishing attack. This attack, also known as cross-site scripting, targets the user of a site instead of a web application itself. The malicious hacker inserts a piece of code into a vulnerable website, which is then executed by the website's visitor. The code can compromise the user's accounts, activate Trojan horses, or modify the website's content to trick the user into giving out private information of theirs. And coming to the second attack is buffer overflow attack. The attackers exploit buffer overflows issues by overwriting the memory of an application, which is used of which is currently used by the user. This changes the execution part of the program, which triggers a response that damages files or exposes private information. For example, an attacker may introduce some extra code sending new instructions to the application to gain access to ID systems used by the company or the users. To the feature part, these features must be implemented in our system so that we can surf to internet without getting hacked or hijacked by the hacker. So, coming to the main point, which is encrypt data sync, it allows one to protect data so that it is entirely unreadable without the key used to encrypt it. So, for example, when we download a file from government authorized website, the file comes in an encrypted manner in which we need a specific key or password to open a file. Without the key, we cannot open and read the content of the file. This feature must be implemented to stay protected because without the key or without the password, we cannot open the file and we cannot get affected to the malware which may or may not be present in the file. And secondly, it's real-time phishing protection. It basically provides real-time scans immediately before sites are visited. It is a very important feature because sometimes we can visit a browser or website knowing or unknowingly, which is full of malware, which can cause phishing on server and our user data. Coming to password protection, it allows only those with an authorized password to gain access to certain information. Is a very safe trick to use because only when a user has password they will receive the information from the website when requested. Browsing in private, the browser creates a temporary session that is isolated from the browser's main session and user data. If you have incognito mode enabled, browser will delete the cookies when you log out while keeping your personal preferences private, and it erases any temporary browsing data as soon as we log out. And one of the great advantages of going incognito is it enables to sign into multiple accounts simultaneously and be safe. Vulnerabilities. There are vulnerabilities that we need to avoid or ignore so that we can browse safely through our web server. As stated as internet cookies. Hackers can steal our cookies to fake login into a website and steal our personal information through the cookies. Secondly, browser extension. There are some extensions which can track our browsing activity or history and inject pesky ads into the websites we visit or using, which obviously opens the door for malware to our system or for our web server. Also need to avoid pop-ups and autofill on the web servers we are using. Pop-ups are part of phishing scam by hackers to trick you into revealing sensitive information through the hackers. Autofill. Third-party scripts that harvest email addresses can be used for malicious purposes by the hackers. To do secure browsing, we can do secure browsing by keeping our browser up to date, and if we also search only to green https padlock sites which are obviously verified and safe to use, and while protecting ourselves while using public Wi-Fi networks. By using a strong antivirus software, our system will be protected whenever we are using it because there will be real-time scans of files we download or websites we visit. And by installing a VPN can also be a safe method to do secure browsing because it will be safe. And by also enabling a privacy setting in our browser, we can safely surf to the internet without our data getting leaked. Thank you.